All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll get things kicked off here. We have a very interesting agenda for you today. Two great topics. Well, the first one is going to be about SANDAGs, public transportation, and the future of San Diego's regional transportation system. It's a very exciting time for this. For anyone who's lived in San Diego, as long as I have, this is truly a unique opportunity that we have, and I've felt that it was critical that everyone is up to speed about what's being proposed, and that we can hopefully all get behind it as the time comes. Can I just get a confirmation that my screen is being shared right now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, 1 second here. I need to admit more people here.
Could you close this? Thank you.
Sorry, the admission process is taking a little extra long. So a couple of things I wanted to mention before we kick things off. First thing is we've had some recent victories. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm very passionate about healthcare. And we recently, since the last meeting, we passed our first town council resolution here in San Diego in support of Medicare for All. That was in Claremont. Thanks to the work that Maury did to connect us with the right people. And we also signed, or we also passed another Democratic Club resolution in support of Medicare for All. We all collaborated on the presentation. That was in early July. That was also in Claremont. So we're now 4 for 4 on Medicare for All resolutions. And I also want to, we're also working on some next steps on that. I won't go through it in this meeting in the interest of time, but I also want to really thank all the people who've been engaged in this fight. Mary Lou, Maury, Tommy, everyone here who's had the pleasure of hearing about single payer healthcare knows how important it is, and I welcome your support, and please keep it up. The other victory we had since the last meeting was to overturn a resolution in support of overturning Citizens United and corporate personhood. We had a great speaker in Sinara Velasquez last month, and we passed our resolution. And we also learned that Congress members Juan Vargas became the second San Diego amongst the San Diego members of Congress to co-sponsor the bill. So things are moving forward on that front. I want to toss it to any public service announcements, but before I do, I'd like to maybe request a motion to approve our meeting minutes from last month.
Maz, could we put this towards the end, because we don't have a quorum right now?
Okay, we can push that off to the end. Let's go ahead with the public service announcements. We'll keep them to 1 to 2 minutes each. Anyone who wants to talk about their candidacy or any other public service announcement, if you can raise your hand. Okay, I see Tommy has raised his hand. You can use the icons there. I see Dr. Tim as well. Okay, why don't we have Tommy go first. Hi, Tommy.
Hi, Maz. It's good to see you. It's good to see everyone tonight. Good to see you, Tim, fellow candidates, and Maury and everyone. My name is Tommy Howell. I'm a San Diego County Planning Commissioner, and I'm running for San Diego City Council in District 6. And I know you've heard a lot about redistricting, but the current boundaries of District 6 include the eastern precincts of Claremont, also Mira Mesa, where I live, Kearney Mesa, Sereno Valley, Miramar, and the southern 2 neighborhoods of Rancho Penasquitos. I was the endorsed Democratic candidate for the seat back in 2018. I think some of you know I was also the founder of San Diego County Democrats for Environmental Action, and we were able to build that club in one of the largest in the County Democratic Party, and we really made climate and certainly the climate action plan, a component of the party, and it's really now a component of what's happening at City Hall as well. But we have a climate action plan that needs to be fully implemented. The state's done a lot of work for us in the interim, but the city really needs to be catching up. In District 6, we have some concerns about housing. We have opportunities for housing, but most of the housing proposals we've had are rather car-centric. We need to figure out better ways to wind up getting more transit to our residents in District 6. We are one of the job centers in the city. We have Miramar here, as well as the Convoy area and Sorrento Valley. These are all economic universes unto themselves. But a lot of times, City Hall has a very hard time seeing beyond those economic centers to the 140,000 San Diego neighbors who call this area in the heart of San Diego home. So infrastructure is a real concern. Restoring our built infrastructure is something that's been lacking in this district. We haven't had leadership on it since going back when Lori Zapp was our council member. We have concerns about housing, and also we have our unique flavor of homelessness here in District 6 as well. This is not just a downtown phenomena. So we have a lot of issues, and I'd like to speak with you more about it. And I look forward to eventually doing that at some point with this club, but I hope to secure your endorsement at some point. And obviously I look forward to speaking with you more. Thanks for the time tonight. Neighborhoods First. Website is tommyhough.com, H-O-U-G-H. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tommy, and feel free to put your info in the chat if you wish. Let's move quickly to Dr. Tim, 2 minutes or less, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Timothy Bylash. I am an obstetrician gynecologist and a research scientist by trade, and an active candidate for the U.S. House in California District 50. That includes areas of Fallbrook, San Marcos, Valley Center, Ramona, Escondido, Santee, Lakeside, El Cajon, east over to the county line, a little bit of Temecula, and a large number of unincorporated areas. And I have to take a breath to do that. Thanks for having me here. My focus for the 2023 session of Congress is to achieve a universal medical care, particularly in California, restore middle-class prosperity through a fairer taxation. I think a lot of the Congress members are working heavily on that. Cultivate economic, cultural, ethnic, and individual equality. I take a slightly wider view of that. I'm a physician by trade and can bring science experience and maybe some kindness to the House in 2023. I hope to persuade you that America is better off having an experienced doctor in Congress to maybe sort through all these different options that we have. I'm glad to be here. And I just want to make a shout out. I think Tommy is one of the most organized candidates I have seen in the 10 years I've been looking at candidates here. So I really like what he's doing, particularly about the environment. So thanks for having me. We have I just mentioned, I think it's under 2 minutes, so I'm going to stop.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. All right. And let's just move right along to Mary Lou has a short announcement about the recall.
Yes. We had a presentation by somebody from Tony Atkins' office in the La Jolla Democratic Club, and I was really aghast that I didn't understand the law about the recall. The recall is going to be September 14th, and all the there will be mail-in ballots starting August 16th. So every registered voter will receive a mail-in ballot. And the limit for registering to vote in the election is 15 days prior to the election. And if you mail it in, it must be postmarked 15 days prior, and online the same thing, 15 days. And you can still vote and take your ballot to the ROV including the day of voting. Now, California is one of 20 states that allows the governor to be recalled. So not all states allow that. And people were able to get enough signatures, so this is going forward. And there's going to be two questions to be answered. The first one is, should the elected official, in other words, Governor Newsom, be removed from office? Now, if that question is answered with 50% of the vote, he will be recalled, because the law says he has to have 50% plus one more vote. And so if he doesn't get the 50% plus one vote, then the next question is, if this official is removed, who should take their place? And the next person with the most amount of percentage, whether it's 10% or 7% or whatever, is going to be the next governor. Now, Kevin Faulconer and other people are in here. There's, I believe, there's like 24 Republicans, 9 Democrats signed up, 1 Libertarian, 2 Green Party, and 10 No Preference Party who are running for this. So obviously they think there's a chance. And so it's very, very important that we vote and we get other people to vote, because we may lose our Democratic governor on the 14th of September. And we may end up with Kevin Faulconer or somebody else. And so I just want to really emphasize to everybody that we need to really get out the vote. And it's not just a midterm where we can kind of be lazy and kind of sit back and, oh, you know, there'll be a runoff. That's not the case. Most people think there'll be a runoff, but that is not the law. So it's kind of dangerous, I think. I'm kind of scared by it, but anyway.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mary Lou. Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
I put some websites in the chat, and also where to vote, to sign up to register online. That's in the chat. So yeah. Thank
you for that. And if you have anyone who needs to re-register, or if you've moved, remember that you have to re-register, so don't forget to do that. And the last time we had a Republican governor, he also got in through a recall. So it's not an unprecedented. I have a couple of hands up here. Let's start with Tommy.
Thank you, Maz. I don't mean to take up a lot of time, but to Mary Lou's points, her fear is indeed very, very well founded. What my volunteers have found in speaking with our neighbors, and what I found speaking with my neighbors, is a lot of our neighbors do not understand that even if you don't support the recall, you still have to fill out the ballot. And we've spoken to a number of individuals who have this idea that, well, I don't support the recall, so therefore I'm just going to ignore the ballot.
Yeah.
Boy, that's the most dangerous thing possible. Then you get into those nightmare scenarios. So I would just say that as we speak with our neighbors throughout the state and our friends throughout the state about how awful John Cox and Kevin Faulconer are, I think it's also vital that we remind everyone that you can't ignore the ballot. Put on there you're against it and mail it back in. Don't ignore it.
Right.
Thank you, Tommy. And I see Maury.
Yes, I'd like to emphasize what Tommy said. And since I have been part of the GO team, and I go door to door in my neighborhood at election time, I'm going to do that again this time, because there's a lot of ignorance and misinformation out there. So I think I recommend that all of us should get involved with phone calls, with talking to friends, talking to neighbors, because a Republican with 10 or 12% of the vote could become the next governor.
Yeah.
This law that we have on the books needs to be changed. And I asked one of our assembly members last time at the Democrat Club of Claremont, and his answer was, I was flabbergasted by his answer. He said, well, this is not the right time to start this. When is the right time? I mean, if it was the Republicans, they would start the process right away to change the law.
Yeah.
This law is a stupid law. It has to be revised. Number of signatures should be not 12.5% of the voters.
Right.
It should be 25, 30% of the voters.
But Maury, Democrats only have a supermajority right now. So how can this get done? Okay, I'll keep my sarcasm to myself. Let me move right along here. Mariam had a quick comment.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm from the Bay Area Iranian Democrat clubs of
Welcome.
San Francisco area. Thank you. I visited your club many times and really enjoyed all the discussions. I just wanted to announce that we have a stop the recall meeting on August 15. And I will send the invitation to Mr. Rahimi. I have his email to pass it on to you, and hopefully everybody can attend. The problem, like he pointed, everybody else is pointing out, they purposely have made this confusing, so you really don't know what to vote or what to say. And my question is, if you just say no, are you done, or do you have to select somebody from the list? Because they have 24 Republicans plus umpteen number of other people running, so the list is really going to be huge. And lots of people, like even my own daughter said, Mom, do you really think that he's going to be recalled? Yes, he will be, because all Republicans vote. All Democrats do not vote.
Yeah.
That's correct.
I think if he gets 50 plus 1, then the second question is not important. But he's got to get the 50% plus 1. Otherwise, the second question then rules.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to just move right along on our agenda and introduce our main speaker. So Philip Throm has kindly accepted our invitation. He is a principal regional planner at the San Diego Association of Governments, SANDAG, the Transportation Planning, Financing, and Coordination Agency for the San Diego region. Philip managed the long-range transportation, goods movement, and binational planning section at SANDAG and is the staff lead for several elements of San Diego Forward, the regional plan, the long-range integrated transportation and comprehensive plan for the San Diego area through 2050. This is what we're going to be hearing about tonight. Prior to his work for the regional plan, he managed the short-range transit division at SANDAG and has previously worked for transportation consulting firms in the Bay Area and San Diego. Philip is a graduate of UCSD, has a master's degree in urban planning from San Jose State, and teaches transportation planning in the master's program at SDSU. Phil, we welcome you to our meeting, and the floor is yours. So let me actually give you sharing privilege here.
Thanks, Maz. I really appreciate it. Can you hear me okay? I just switched to my headset.
We can hear you very well. Let's make sure you can actually share.
Yeah, let me try that. Okay. Yes, and it's coming. It should be coming up right up here.
Awesome.
Let's see. I switched to my home screen. So let's see. Here we go. Okay. All right, let me know when that comes up.
Not yet.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, it's on the way here.
We can see it now, yes.
Okay, and I'll start the first slide. Well, wonderful. Well, and thank you, Mas, for inviting me to come and speak with your group tonight. And thank you just individually for being so engaged in this effort. We really, really appreciate it. So this is something that is near and dear to my heart, and I've been working on these kind of long range plans for a long time. And we're in the midst of a draft plan review right now. That's what I'll be sharing with you tonight. And it's a really exciting plan. It's very different than anything we've put together before. So we just, we'll scratch the surface a little bit. I want to share kind of the highlights with you, but also encourage you and remind me again to, at the end to say this, because I want to make sure we get you to the right place where you can peruse the plan. It's actually very short and concise and very visual. And we wanted to get your thoughts about it. So it's out for public review until August 6th. So it's been like a 3-month review, but we're in that last sort of home stretch, but hopefully enough time where you can kind of sit with it a little bit if you're interested in this kind of long range regional transportation stuff. So, so again, thanks for having me tonight. Really, truly appreciate it. We're thrilled to get the word out. Wanted to start a little bit with what is SANDAG. I know I'm sure many of you have heard of SANDAG, or at least, you know, sometimes people know about SANDAG on the freeway for the freeway service patrol if you run out of gas or something like that. But we're a much bigger organization than a lot of people think we are, and we're kind of behind the scenes sometimes. So just to share a little bit about what we do, we're what's called a metropolitan planning organization, which is a federal designation that puts us kind of front and center for for long range and short range transportation planning in the region. And our region, specifically for us, and every region is kind of unique. We're a one county region. So it's the county of San Diego makes up the region. So all 18 cities in the county. And then we even have some pretty exciting members on our board of directors. We would involve the transit agencies and even the Republic of Mexico too, with our ties cross border. So we're also Council of Governments too. That's one of these functions we serve. And so we're the conveners of all the cities to get together. So transportation is one of these, as a professor, I talked about this in my transportation classes. Transportation is one of these things that, you're in when you're making a trip on anything, whether it's a bus or driving around, you're crossing city boundaries all the time and you don't really know it, right? So it's inherently a regional thing, and sometimes like a mega regional thing or a sort of, interstate thing even. So SANDAG is responsible for that, but it's because our county has these kind of natural boundaries all around, and we're a sort of one county group. So that's a little bit of the nuts and bolts on what SANDAG is. To share what is a regional plan. So what do we mean by a regional plan? So these things used to be called regional transportation plans. Now they bring a lot of considerations about land use, which is exciting, and working with the cities, kind of that land use transportation connection. So we call them regional plans. And actually the state sort of put this in motion back about 13 years ago within a state bill that required us to track and reduce greenhouse gas emissions for cars and light duty trucks in these types of plans. So that's a big state, and I'll kind of double back on that. But that's why the name, right? It's no more than just transportation. It's sort of sustainability and land use all rolled in together. These plans are supposed to go out they need to go out at least 20 years. We go out to 30 years. So we are out to 2050 in this plan, and have been so for a couple cycles, primarily because we can kind of capture and understand funding a little bit more better in that 30-year time frame, because we have a current sales tax measure, a half-cent sales tax called Transnet that pays for a chunk of the plan through 2050 essentially. So and kind of back to, what is a regional plan too, a lot of what it is and what I'll be sharing tonight is all this sort of policies, programs, and projects that we think the region can deliver on over the next 30 years and kind of incrementally along the way. So that's transit and active transportation, like bicycle, pedestrian projects, and highway projects and roadway projects, and kind of everything in between. Where we are on the sort of timeline of everything, back in 2019, we had a new executive director, Hassan Akrada, started with us, and kind of we started reimagining what these long-range plans could be in a very bold manner. And so we developed kind of this approach back in 2019 that sort of culminated in a presentation of this vision as an overarching vision in the summer of 2020. And then that turned into a plan where we understood sort of projects over time and revenues over time. That turned into this plan that was released at the end of May. So we're in this 3-month review period that is concluding on August 6th. So we're hoping folks can get in and give us comments. And we make it real easy. It's an online, and I'll share the link to that, real easy to get in and leave your sort of comments online, but also there's a lot of other means to do so. To start a bit about sort of the vision, the goals, and what we're trying to accomplish in this plan. So primarily there are these 3 challenges that we're looking at. And how do we reduce congestion, but improve social equity while meeting state and federal mandates? And so the overarching sort of phrase we've come up with is being faster, fairer, and cleaner. So faster by reducing congestion and providing multimodal options. There's other ways to get around than just driving. Fairer by looking at equity in a really meaningful way, and cleaner by meeting these state mandates for greenhouse gas reductions and federal requirements for air quality. So what that is, it means, and I know, I love groups like yours that really get into policy. So this is kind of the policy slide, or just the legislative side, at least from, kind of the mandates from federal and state governments. And so the first one, we had this SB 375, which requires us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's been updated, so we have more stringent requirements to meet even than the last time we did a plan. And air quality is a federal Clean Air Act thing where we need to reduce certain pollutants under certain thresholds. Title VI is compliance with federal civil rights requirements and environmental justice. This goes hand in glove with our focus on social equity in this plan. CEQA, that term is the California Environmental Quality Act, which is a longstanding requirement of projects, but also, you know, a lot of people don't know that plans like this of this magnitude have to go through that review as well. And under that, there was a Senate Bill 743 that required a different approach in how to look at travel impacts. And so projects like envisioned in the plan and how the cities and the regions sort of, you know, bring these forward will no longer look at what used to be a very sort of, you know, monocentric or whatever you want to call it, measure of just congestion, right? It was level of service. It was like trying to figure out how much delay in the system. And now we look at how many vehicle miles are the result of these projects. So transit reduces miles, but highway projects tend to increase those. So a whole different way of looking at things from the state of California. And tribal consultations. So we really wanted to also share, in addition to being a council of governments of all 18 cities, we have 18 tribal nations, independent tribal nations in our county too. And so we have meaningful engagement with them as tribal nations and how the projects and programs affect them. So that's on the mandate side. Hopefully you're interested in that side to kind of get some background. From sort of a baseline of what, you know, why do we need transportation? We're looking at the future, obviously. So incrementally, year by year, getting up to 2050, and we see a projection of our forecast from a countywide population of 3.3 million. That is projected to go up by 13% in 2050. So we have new folks in the region, and it's a combination of, you know, natural factors and migration, out-migration estimates. A lot of it comes from the state, but we are a growing region, so we will have even more needs in the future. Housing also matches that, and there's a growth in housing, much needed housing in the region based on the statistics, and that's 1.2 million units going up 24% by 2050. And jobs, right now we're 1.6 million jobs in the county, and that would go up, projection is 27% by 2050. So that's kind of the background needs. One of the really exciting things about where we are kind of in space and time, obviously, and I'll touch upon COVID and what that has sort of helped us understand in some ways on you know, transportation sort of acting and feeling different. One thing is that technology trends are really on the uptick. And so think about, you know, even 10 years ago, we really didn't have Uber and Lyft, and you know, those things have become a little muted, obviously, with COVID, but you know, the on-demand experience with transportation has sort of become part of the norm. So, you know, like in my classes at SDSU, I always hold my phone up in the first class and say, you know, what's the number one sort of transportation service? It's kind of become your phone, right? Whether it's information you get about, you know, how you know, whatever, turn-by-turn directions and, you know, using Google Maps and all that stuff, or it's actually requesting rides from the Uber and Lyfts of the world, or how you find transit information, right? And so ultimately, it's expected that as more real-time data is exchanged at high speeds and with lots of more data collected, we'll be able to sort of schedule and book trips kind of amongst many different ways of getting around, sort of the transit to the, you know, the bike rental to the car even, right? So that's mobility as a service. Really exciting stuff. Vehicle technologies are also rapidly expanding, and actually San Diego is home to a lot of them. And we have been sort of a test bed for a lot of the connected vehicle technology, along with the what would be ultimately autonomous vehicles, sort of independent vehicles. And that may have some major implications, right? And sort of how we look at that and opportunities. And I would say kind of hand in hand is how cities and roadways respond, right? So that would be more of a regional, you know, project thing that we look at how we would do have smart intersections, right? Talking to one another and, you know, more free flow and also dynamically sort of allowing permissive things or maybe even payment for certain lanes and, you know, allowing sort of transit to get through the system and really maximizing the system that we have today and that the system will have in the future. Smart cities and transportation systems, that kind of gets to the granular level of cities and how, you know, parking is done and management of roadways and sort of how the system again can be done in a very efficient manner, and how there can be some, you know, equity amongst ways to get around. So we started off this whole process in that, you know, initial slide I had about sort of where we are in time, and, you know, we had this initiation of what we call the five, or the framework, and what that was the 5 big moves. So hopefully, you know, maybe if you've heard about this, it's these 5 interreliant strategies that can't really kind of evolve on their own. We see them all kind of coupled together to work as one system to enhance each other as well. So what those 5 moves are is complete corridors, how our roadways evolve and how technology can be embedded, how we can look at, you know, higher occupancy and efficiencies, how they can support other modes. That's kind of like a, you know, that's sort of the backbone in a sense of a lot of our system is our existing roadways. Transit leap, how, you know, we do have unfortunately pretty low transit, you know, ridership as a percentage, but a lot of we know about travel is people respond to money and time. So if you can provide time competitive options and go to the places people want to go, you can actually reverse that trend. You know, we have all been to, you know, a lot of the big cities, right, that have sort of the opposite that we have in San Diego. You have a lot of transit use, and the fact of the matter is either parking's really expensive, or you just have a better system that's just getting people around quickly and cheaply, right? So this is it's a bigger jump, it's a leap to much more robust transit services. Mobility hubs. What we mean by that is how the land, and, you know, we call this land use, but really it's like, you know, how the places where people kind of transfer or use or get on or start and stop their trips, how can those be focal points for connection? So how can you have, you know, bike share connecting with transit, connecting with parking, vehicle parking, that kind of thing. So traditionally we think of those as transit centers. Over time, the concept of transit oriented development, or TOD, has evolved to kind of look at more of a systems approach. And this sort of looks at all of that, but adds amenities and in kiosks and how people could get packages potentially at transit centers, and what is the next generation or the next vision of what transit centers are. That's mobility hubs. Flexible fleets go one step further and look at bringing people to those places. Sometimes, you know, San Diego County, a lot of San Diego County is pretty low density. So we have what in the sort of transportation circles, and I'm trying to avoid any jargon, but, you know, this like first and last mile dilemma of how, you know, if you want or interested in transit, or maybe you're transit dependent, but how you get to that transit service, whether it's walking, you know, most likely, right, if you don't have other services, but how can you get quickly and cheaply to regional nodes of transit? That's flexible fleets, and this idea that we could facilitate that in a really interesting way. Next OS, that 5th piece, is the technology, kind of the brain or the system that is relying upon the development of data sort of being exchanged back and forth, so we can get the best travel information out there and choices, so people are fully informed about all trips they're making, and they understand travel costs and you know, even, you know, there's a lot can come out of that, right, as far as people's preferences for travel, but it's more than just, you know, time and money or cost and how long it takes you to get there. But that would be a way to use information so people can, you know, have more information to inform their trips and their travel, and how to make the system more efficient in the process. So our vision and goals, that kind of, you know, emphasizes that other slide, but the idea is a fast, fair, and clean transportation system and a resilient region. So we're kind of looking at that, all those elements coming together to make sure we facilitate efficient movement of people and goods, access to affordable, reliable, and safe mobility options for everyone in the region. And that's that equity piece. And healthy, in the process, healthier air and reduced GHG emissions. These are really the fundamental, this is what we're trying to get out of the goal, out of this plan, and how we sort of combine and connect transportation systems over time, and transportation investments over time. So what does this look like? You know, as planners, we always try to think of like, you know, how do you visualize these things? And we've spent some time trying to do that. So this is just a screenshot of a mixed use, somewhat urban neighborhood. This is, I think this is University Avenue in North Park. how we can get some of these things working together. So you see the green protected, bike lanes. You also see those kind of fun little, mini vehicles that sort of represents flex fleets, how you could have some autonomous potentially in the future, or just connecting smaller vehicles to trunk line transit, having connections to what is the regional transportation transit service, which is expressed as a trolley here, and how you have a lot of amenities for pedestrians too and cyclists, and you kind of have an activated street and community via transportation. So, and through this, we just to throw a data point in here, one of I mentioned our targets for greenhouse gas reductions. We have to reduce greenhouse gases by emissions by 19% per capita by 2035. And so it's a really aggressive target. I mean, it might sound like a low target, but it just takes moving mountains to do that. And we see that we are meeting that target when we're slightly above it at 20%. So, and I'll click, these are animated, I'll just click through to just share like where we are today and what some of the data is telling us. And we have really sophisticated transportation models that we run these kind of computer simulations to understand, how if the services we're sort of combining are desirable. In 2016, sort of back 5 years, we have, we've kind of see the work, work trip, right, is 80% drive alone in our region. 80% of people going to work are individually driving single cars, right? That's what that means. And very little carpool, we have 13%, and even much smaller transit and bike and walk. And those are the areas we see these really huge gains as we deploy and sort of invest in these alternative solutions. So we see by 2035, the models tell us that our transit goes up to 11%, and we get double our bike and walk, and that just continues to rise as we get to 2050. And some of our modeling tools are kind of based in today's preference, so we hope that would even be more as people's sort of behaviors start to shift. And there's a lot of behavior and analytical research going into that too, that we hope our models will absorb over time. This is kind of a fun oblique sort of angled view on how the system would look for our region, and sort of focused on the more urbanized area, the western half. Mobility hubs is those focal points that are community resources for transportation and areas, kind of like transit centers plus. And then we have on top of that, local and express bus service. A lot of it we have today, kind of expanding that to include, subsidies for low-income riders and more frequent, even local bus service and trunk line express service, as well as spans of service. Services that are operating all day, if possible, and on the weekend to facilitate folks that have just different jobs at different times, and that's one of these focuses on equity. We also have the highway system and arterial system, and how we sort of combine that with transit and provide safe upgrades in the rural areas for evacuation and safety purposes. A lot of these, the focus is on a managed lane system. Thinking about I-15 in North County, how we have a system that has a regional bus that is a long haul and just as fast as driving, which is paid for by solo drivers that pay into the system where space is available for them. And that's priced for those solo drivers based on demand of the system and HOV riding free. Over time, we see that as being a more kind of expanded system. So very much like the I-15, but on the rest of all of the major interstates and state routes. Next with that, and kind of coupled into that system, is rapid bus. Like we have on the I-15 corridor to downtown, that would kind of be everywhere where you have an auto-like experience or auto-like travel time on transit. With light rail, and that's a lot of our our red trolley cars that hopefully you're familiar with in South Bay and out to Southeast San Diego and El Cajon, but that would be expanded, and also the Sprinter corridor in North County. And then commuter rail stations. So this is I would say one of these major enhancements in the plan. For a while, we've been assuming coastal, like the coaster service where the Amtrak is. That was really what's considered to be heavy rail. we would have commuter rail throughout the region going out to El Cajon and all the way down to the border at San Ysidro and Otay Mesa. So that's kind of a view of all that coming together. A couple quick slides to share what that looks like for each of these types of service. So on the complete corridors, the highway and arterial system, that's what this looks like with the managed lanes as green there with the connection between them, and then these urban corridor managed lanes too. And then we would have transit leap with those purple lines being that high-speed service, and the light rail shown as red, and then that kind of weave it like kind of thin green line everywhere. That's all those rapid bus services, that high-speed rapid transit. And then the mobility hubs are about 30 areas where these catchment of transportation and kind of where we think there's opportunities in communities to focus on certain points of interaction between services, along with the flex fleets to get people there. And that's that dark green. The Next OS, the technology behind it, it really runs the gamut. It's exciting stuff. It's evolving stuff. We have smart intersections that can talk to each other and facilitate sort of waves of vehicles, and also how you assign permission for each route. Some of this stuff is being even deployed in Chicago, and how emergency vehicles get extra space and can be assigned by. This is like showing it as like a kind of a gantry over a freeway, but that all could be automated in the future too. And then we have electric vehicle charger incentives. We also have purchase incentive in the plan. There's a big emphasis on changing propulsion systems. Digital equity, the one that shows the, I guess I have a cursor here. Digital equity, this is, and I want to be mindful of the time too, Maz, with the allotment, I don't want to go over, but transportation is so fascinating because it's like, it's connective tissue, right, of how we get around our region. And we saw with COVID, connection was internet in a lot of ways, right? And for people work and even social and even telehealth and medicine, we're really looking at ways to bridge this sort of digital divide where some communities are really without high-speed broadband, and looking at that that deployment or that improvement through a social equity lens. Other things, these flexible fleets and how you get bike rental and scooter rental and all that working together, and then partnerships across private providers and local providers. So that's the Next OS. And active transportation means our bike network, but it also means complete streets and how we can really make streets real experiences for pedestrians and cyclists, and focus on vision zero and zero fatalities. It's been a challenge, and we've had some really high profile fatalities even over this last month, to really shine the light of needs of looking at safety on our active transportation corridors, and then in looking at other things too, like e-bikes and that kind of e-infrastructure. Goods movement, again, a COVID thing where, we sort of saw packages delivered at our house, right? And you kind of understand that, these things don't just invisibly sort of, get around, your packages and everything you order. And that's a big part of our system. And a lot of people don't think about it, but we certainly do. And we include investments in that way, especially tacking on technology and technology availability. Sustainable growth and development. This is just to share, and I know I want to make sure there's time for questions, but we're looking at the land use side, and there's a whole chapter about that in the plan if you're interested. We touched upon electric vehicle charging and how that means incentives to for reduced charging and where those charging locations are, but also in purchasing vehicles, especially with that under an equity lens as well. Demand management, we saw a lot of people working with COVID, but how that looks in the future, how we can prop up employer programs and sustainable transportation encouragement programs too. This is all not, this is not free stuff. There is some ask of this over time. We think we'll have to have more sales tax measures out there. We'll have some dynamic tolling, kind of like, pay at the service point, right? Which is, when you're pay on a toll as a direct payment. We do have assumptions of road usage charge, providing options for transit, but on those corridors, if people choose to use a single occupant vehicle, there would be more an approach for charging for that ability to do that, and some other ways to sort of creatively get at how we can prop up this system, because it's definitely not free. And this slide shows that it is it's in the billions with a B, right? But this is, our plans have always been, really of this magnitude. I think this is just such an integrated approach, but it is an uptick. I think our last plan was 130 million, and this is in the 160, 63 billion range. So that money, we don't project it all coming in overnight, comes in over time, but that's really incumbent on the region to find the best projects to do first and early. And that's where implementation comes in. That's sort of the next step after long range planning. Maybe with that, I just say our equity framework is very important. We had our board adopted this, which is continuous learning through accountability, meaningful impact, prioritization of investments, looking at reporting and evolving over time, and quality engagement with our region and our disadvantaged communities. And we map that and we evaluate the heck out of it. So this is just a couple maps to share where we combine sort of minority population, how we provide access, low income population, which is kind of a cross-cutting one or amongst our disadvantaged population, but low income households and where the transit is and where transportation is, and senior populations. So we have lots in the plan. I'd encourage you to take a look at it. It's pretty short. It's just over 50 pages. It's much smaller than these have been in the past. We have the appendices are chock full of information, which is here. If you have a certain area, you're interested in, I can help point you to what appendix that is. But we think we have this kind of ideal combination. Really get the thrust of this over 50 pages, and you can scan it, and then deep dives here on the appendix. It's at sd4.com, and actually we have a data viewer where you can zoom into your neighborhood and whatever geography you want to see, how zoomed in you want to be. At sd4.com is where you find the plan and comment, but also /envision is where you can look at, when's the regional transit coming to my neighborhood? Where's it going to go? All those kind of things. The data viewer is really fun to play with. It's real easy to use. And here's where you can go for comments. We also receive them by phone and email and fax and mail. And so the easiest way is to do it online, but certainly, and I'll make sure Maz has this presentation to pass along if you're interested. It just takes a few minutes to submit a comment to, or even less. So yeah, and our timeline is we'll get the close the comment period in a couple weeks, and then we'll get toward adoption of this plan around sort of the end of the year, end of the calendar year. We have a QR code that you can click on, when Maz shares the PowerPoint, and yeah, and I think that's it for me. And Maz, sorry if I went a couple minutes over there.
No worries at all. Thank you very much for a great presentation, Phil. And I know we had a little bit of a late start, but I want to kick off the question and answer section. We don't have too much time on it, but I'll just kick it off with, let me preface my question actually with two fallacies I think people have when it comes to public transportation, funding, specifically funding public transportation, which is many people have gotten used to the idea of not taking public transportation, as your statistics kind of showed. And so they are naturally not inclined to invest in it because they figure, I will continue to use my car, so why should I fund it? And I think the way to think about that is, obviously, even if you don't use public transportation once in your life, you're still benefiting from that investment, because traffic congestion, to the degree that you can take people off the roads, off the freeways, that helps everybody. It's unsustainable to keep making lanes in perpetuity. And then the other fallacy I've seen is to view it as a return as a profitable venture. Making sure the fees for riding the trolley are self-sustaining, and I think that's another fallacy. It's a sort of a right-wing framing of the issue. It's really an investment in how to make our economy work more efficiently and better. So part of the reason I personally wanted to have you guys here explain this is just to make sure people are aware that this is going on, and that, yes, as you pointed out, it will cost money and we will be asked to pay for those things. So my real question is, when will be or I don't know if this is outside of your expertise. Actually, it's two questions. When will we be asked to fund this, or is there some proposition that's going to come, or measure, ballot measure that will ask us to fund it? That's one question. And the second question is, since I know it's impossible to get into too much depth in this presentation, what's in terms of railway footprint, how much is that increasing relative to what we have today?
Yeah, great question. I think I can answer those. I think fairly quickly. So on the when are we going to ask to pay for it? That's an excellent question. We do have an implementation appendix B in the plan that kind of lays out what would be required. I think we have some things that will take some work, some legislative, like state requirements to allow sort of more pricing, like the I-15. We need legislation to expand that. That's one of those things. That would be done at the sort of state legislative level. Similar with that, for road pricing, the state is doing pilot. Actually, Jim Adaffer, former council president and council member from our region, is piloted that with the state, and there's been a lot of sort of both sides of the aisle work on that, on road user pricing. The state may go into it, and then at the same time we would need to get permission from it at the state level. When that was approved, that would kick in some fashion, we think more around 2030. So the ask would be kind of this, kind of incremental over time with a bit more research. So that the kind of window on that projected is about 2030. Sales tax measure. So, that's one of the suite and one of the tools we have. Transnet has been very successful to bring the Midcoast Trolley and at the time, a lot of highway investments, to be honest, right? But, I think funding this plan through such a sales tax measure could happen mostly. And I love the point, I forget who, and I don't know if it was you, Miriam, about, sort of Republicans vote, Democrat, there's a challenge there with getting the votes, and we're always counting the votes and looking at that. And it's a challenge to get sales tax measures. So we look at presidential elections, and I think there's some magic to that, to get out the vote as much as possible. So we would think about maybe 2024 would be the next presidential. It could be a sales tax measure. Oddly enough, that has to come outside of SANDAG, so there might be a public effort to support that. So 24, 28, maybe an interim one. Those are tough. We require a super majority now for a sales tax measure in our state, as I'm sure you know. So that might be the timeline on the payment side for the biggies, right? For the pricing, so I would look at the state legislator and things that come through there, both on the permission and actual, kicking in of road pricing. So, yeah, does that answer your question? I think
it does. Yeah, and then the railway footprint.
Yeah,
question.
it is significant, and so that's where we see as less friction if we do rail, and there's going to be requirements for some tunneling and some kind of expensive projects. But I think our director has really focused us around providing transit services that are competitive, right? So that are higher speed, and one of the ways to do that is with rail, to be honest. And even there's been a lot of research in how you do tunnels cheaper, and there's there's a whole activity happening on the engineering construction side. But I think our rail on the coaster corridor, we have about 20 miles of rail, just like origin destination from Oceanside to downtown, 20 plus maybe. And then this goes up to I think a couple 100 miles of rail. So it's kind of like it's almost like a 10x application. So yeah, pretty significant. Some of that is with some statewide assumptions, which we sort of follow the state rail plans, and we hope that comes to fruition. We don't really consider that as our projects, but I think about 80% of that, yeah, maybe another 80 miles of rail would come from investments within the county, right, within this plan. So.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Let's go to Maury, who's raised his hand. If you have any questions, please raise your hand in Zoom. Go ahead, Maury.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for a good presentation. My question again is with regards to revenue side, because if you don't have sufficient revenue, you cannot implement the plans. I understand that the revenue of in San Diego for public transportation compared to Los Angeles and San Francisco is just unbelievably low. I heard some time ago that in Los Angeles, it's like 10 times as much as it is here. I think we here I think our share here is 1/8 of a penny compared to Los Angeles, which is 2 pennies, and San Francisco, which is more than 2 pennies of the sales tax. Please give us some information so that next time when it comes for voting, we could encourage everybody to vote on it.
Yeah, thanks, Maury. You're exactly right. I think our partners to the north, their sales tax measure came through their transit authority, and that's where they put the lion's share of their cents. And I think what we have 1/2 cent right now through Transnet. They have 2.5 cents, and most of that is transit. So you're right. There's that 10x kind of thing. We think that if we're able to be successful for another sales tax measure and align it with this plan, we can have a huge focus on coming through with these transit investments, meaning both building them and operating them in perpetuity. So yeah, that would be a huge component, I believe, of a potential sales tax measure, would be to fund that and fund it in a real way, right? I think, with Transnet, it tried to give what 1/3 to roads, 1/3 to cities, 1/3 to transit, and of transit, only a portion was operation. So like you're exactly right. We kind of whittled it down to that sort of what was the true investment in day-to-day operations. And we need to do a much better job of that to align with this plan.
Thank you for that, Phil. Any other questions before we move on? All right, thank you again, Phil, for the wonderful presentation. And yeah, I'm happy to share it with the group and along with your contact info, if that's okay. If anyone has any questions, I'm sure there's a ton to dig into, and really appreciate your time again. So
yeah, thank you, Maz, and thank you everyone for having us. And please reach out if you have any questions about the plan as you take a look, and would certainly encourage you to dig in and look at it. I think it's a lot of fun, and we're really proud of it. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to move along to our next guest here, Shervin Aazami, who is running in District 30 of California District 30, which is in Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley area. I learned about Shervin about maybe a month ago, and was pretty excited because, first of all, it's not every day that we have an Iranian American running for Congress. We've had a few before, but it's kind of we're sort of underrepresented in that space, as we all know. But more importantly, I just got to see some of his public speaking, some of his policies, and I was quite impressed. So I'll just read you guys a little bit about his background and let him fill in anything I may have missed. So Shervin Aazami is an immigrant, public health activist, husband, father, and working class champion fighting for economic and racial justice. He worked on HIV prevention and harm reduction within the LGBTQ+ community, and later in Washington, D.C. as the city health department's HIV screening coordinator. He successfully led to eliminate copays and cost sharing for Native American veterans seeking healthcare services through the VA, securing long-term funding for community health centers and diabetes prevention programs like the SDPI, delivered over $100 million annually into underserved communities to address the opioid crisis and to establish patient-centered community behavioral health programs, and over $4 billion in direct healthcare and public health funding to tribal governments to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Shervin holds a Master's of Public Health degree from George Washington University, where he wrote his thesis on the generational public health consequences of mass incarceration, and a Master of Public Administration degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Shervin, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you, Maz, so much for inviting me. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. And thank you to the Iranian American Democrats of San Diego for the invitation. Salam. My name is Shervin Aazami. As mentioned, I am a father, a husband, a public health activist, community organizer, and immigrant running for US Congress in my hometown, San Fernando Valley, California's 30th district. Our district encompasses many well-known neighborhoods, including Encino, Sherman Oaks, Toluca Lake, Burbank, Woodland Hills, Winnetka, Northridge. We have over 484,000 registered voters. Our district is D+18 and very progressive, won by Bernie Sanders during the presidential primary. Yet we've been stuck with the same corporate representation for 24 years. As Maz mentioned, I'm a former legislative director on Capitol Hill, fighting to make sure the federal government honors its treaty obligations to tribal nations. And we were doing that work during the height of COVID-19, with Native peoples being disproportionately impacted by death rates, infection rates, and hospitalization rates. And through our advocacy, for the first time in US history, we were able to get direct funding to tribal governments during a public health crisis to respond and protect their people with vaccines, testing kits, public health resources, and so forth. Even during the H1N1 crisis under Obama and the Spanish flu pandemic a century prior, even though death rates among Native peoples were 4 times the general population, our government sent tribes body bags as opposed to actual resources. And as Maz mentioned, one of the bills I'm most proud of getting across the finish line is a bill that canceled co-pays and deductibles for Native American veterans, getting us one step closer to passage of something like single-payer Medicare for all. And these are really the issues that we've centered our campaign around. As the son of 2 Iranian American asylum seekers who fled Iran during the time of the revolution, just around 25 years after our government here in the United States deposed the only democratically elected leader in Iranian history. So the politics has always been personal for me. Like many of you, I am here because of political decisions that were outside of our community's control. And seeing our representative in CA 30, Brad Sherman, a war hawk who to this day still stands by his votes for the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, who has voted against stopping US military aid to the Saudi-led war in Yemen, and who voted against the Iran nuclear deal, and to this day still touts voting against the Iran nuclear deal. Someone who is a huge proponent of economic sanctions on Iran, when all of us have seen that these economic sanctions have done nothing to reduce the stranglehold of the despotic Iranian regime over the Iranian people, nor have they done anything to reduce Iran's financing of terrorism abroad. The definition of insanity from Albert Einstein is doing the same thing over and over again and anticipating a different result. People like Brad Sherman, imperialists like Brad Sherman, seem to think that continuing down this road of economic sanctions will ultimately lead to success when we're seeing the exact opposite. And many of you know that a few months ago, Iran signed a 25-year, $400 billion deal with China for Chinese telecommunications, military resources, and so forth. And so the irony there is China hawks like Brad Sherman also don't seem to understand that these economic sanctions are also pushing the Iranian regime further into the hands of our political opponents, like the Chinese and the Russians. Meanwhile, back here at home in our district, CA 30 is the location of the largest natural gas blowout in US history at Aliso Canyon, where we saw 109,000 metric tons of methane dumped into the air. And under our governor, we've seen methane storage only increase in Aliso Canyon. In addition to that, our district is also the location of one of the largest nuclear meltdowns in US history at the Santa Susana Field Lab, which is a location of over 30,000 rocket tests, dumping all that radioactive waste into the nearby soil, polluting our groundwater for decades. And as opposed to fighting for remediation, cleanup, and closure of both sites, our incumbent Brad Sherman is financed by the very corporations responsible for those environmental catastrophes. Our campaign is proudly running on the bold structural policy reforms we know we could achieve if we really had corporate-free representation that is putting in the work to actually advocate for these changes. Changes like single-payer Medicare for all, housing as an inherent human right, climate justice, and a bold Green New Deal, divesting from the US war machine, decriminalizing our immigration system, living wages tied to regional cost of living, a universal basic income, workers' rights and unionization rights for all these issues that are important to progressives that we could achieve if we had the right leaders putting in the work. And like I mentioned, for a district like ours, D+18 that Bernie won, there is no political downside for our representative to really stick his neck out there and be the bold advocate that we need him to be. But in his 24 years in office, Brad Sherman has championed 2 bills, one under Bush, the other under Trump. The one under Bush was a name change to a post office in our district. The one under Trump were sanctions on China. Meanwhile, Los Angeles is also the epicenter of our housing and homelessness crisis. We have 5 unhoused neighbors die per day in the city of Los Angeles. And we're seeing the city invest more and more money into criminalization of homelessness, as opposed to addressing it as the socioeconomic and public health crisis that it is. We're also seeing soaring housing costs all across LA and in California. In the San Fernando Valley, the current median home price is $955,000. And one of the main reasons why is because now 1 in 5 single family homes nationwide are being bought by Wall Street firms, are being bought by pension funds and private equity firms like BlackRock and Blackstone. Well, those are also the very same firms financing Brad Sherman's reelection campaigns. Less than 2% of his campaign contributions come from small dollar donors. Everything else is from corporations and lobbyists. And he's been occupying our seat in Congress on their behalf since day one. I believe we need a real progressive advocate, someone who's going to put in the work to get these structural policy reforms done. I am proud to say that I got more bills passed in 2 years as an advocate than Brad has in 24 years as a legislator. So as someone who's done the work on Capitol Hill, I can say from experience that Brad Sherman saying, well, I co-sponsored Medicare for All, I co-sponsored the Green New Deal. Co-sponsorship is the floor, not the ceiling. All that goes into co-sponsoring a bill is sending a 1-sentence email to the bill sponsor saying, please add my boss's name. You didn't have to help write the legislation. You didn't have to offer an amendment. You didn't have to give your opinion. But you get to add your name to the legislation and go back to your community and give lip service and virtue signal about all the great work you're doing. That's not leadership. That's not being an advocate. And on a more personal level too, as I mentioned earlier, as a son of Iranian asylum seekers, to know that our congressman here was the only Democrat to speak at a rally hosted by the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK, in 2019. An Iranian, I'm sure I don't have to convince any of you who the MEK are, a despotic separatist group that were responsible for countless bombings, kidnappings, and forced disappearances during the Iran-Iraq War. And the only reason now they suddenly came back into the political spotlight is because they've been giving a lot of handsome speaking fees to legislators on both sides of the aisle. And that rally that Brad Sherman spoke at in 2019, he spoke at that rally alongside John Bolton, Rudy Giuliani, and Mike Pompeo. That's the company that Brad Sherman, as a self-declared progressive, keeps when it comes to foreign policy. So again, I believe we deserve a real progressive champion, someone who is not bought by corporations and lobbyists, someone who has successfully championed progressive legislation at the national level, and someone who will not stop to uplift and empower working people, dismantle white supremacy, and end corporate welfare. That's what our campaign's all about. That's what I've devoted my entire life to fight for social justice through the lens of public health. And as a son of 2 people who fled religious persecution and grew up in working class neighborhoods where my mom went back to work in retail while my dad went back to school to become a primary care physician. You know, I always say, I'm humbled to say that I learned the power of responsibility from my mother and the power of service from my father. And so I'm very grateful to all of you for the opportunity to speak with you about the 30th district, about our vision and our race. And I'll stop there as I want to make sure there is ample opportunity for questions.
Thank you very much, Shervin John. I'll open it up to people who want to raise their hands. You know, I have a list of like 10 questions I want to ask you, but in the interest of time, I will keep them to myself for now. Anyone want to go first? If not, I'm happy to jump in. I'm seeing some claps. All right. All right, then I'll just go ahead and start. I'm sure people are formulating their questions. So one question I have for you, Shervin, is if your campaign were to catch fire, what is your strategy to fend off the establishment attacks that are going to come your way? Your age, your ethnic background. I mean, those are two things that I can think of off the top of my head. But most importantly, you're not part of the club. So not being part of the club, and I'm not talking about the general election, I'm talking about the primary. Can you talk us through, you know, have you thought about that? Do you have a strategy to fend that off or go on the attack yourself?
That's a great question. And what I'll say is we are already seeing a lot of attacks. Several of Brad Sherman's staffers follow us on social media, and they like to take different hits at us on different issues. In fact, over the weekend, one of his staffers nailed us for speaking at a Medicare for All rally in Los Angeles, one of 50 nationwide, which is very ironic given that his boss co-sponsored Medicare for All. So it really demonstrates that his co-sponsorship is not actually grounded in a real commitment to passage of single payer. It's simply to fend off a primary challenger. And so again, in our district that is D+18, that Bernie Sanders won during the 2020 presidential primary with 44,000 votes, people are ready for change. And we have centered our campaign on the policy issues that matter: guaranteeing clean air and water as inherent human rights, canceling student debt, single payer, a homes guarantee, divesting from the US war machine, and so forth. These are the issues on the minds of our voters. I can count on one hand how many people we've reached. I've reached out to over 10,000 folks so far in our district. I can count on one hand how many folks have said they support Brad Sherman. So we are tapping into a growing progressive zeal in our district. We have over 150 volunteers already signed up, 70% of whom live inside our district. We have outraised all prior primary challengers combined in our district. We already have the endorsement of national progressive groups like Brand New Congress, and a lot of local groups, including Democratic clubs in our district, like the Feel the Burn Democratic Club. And we're also endorsed by organizations like the West Valley People's Alliance, which have the largest homeless outreach group in the entire San Fernando Valley. But going back to your question, Maz, you know, we are building a new political coalition of young people, people of color, immigrants that are sick and tired of the status quo and are ready for real structural change. And our district is very racially diverse and very ethnically diverse. Over 40% of our district voters are foreign born. We have a huge Arab population, a huge Iranian population, a huge Korean population, Indian population, and Latinx population. Roughly a third of our voters are Latinx. And so really tapping into the policies and issues that matter, that are on the minds of voters, is how we're going to flip this seat, and really demonstrating that, look, we should absolutely have a real progressive champion. There is no reason why we cannot have a bona fide progressive leader in our San Fernando Valley district. And so the establishment will always attack us. They will attack every progressive challenger. Our strategy is, again, focusing on the issues, meeting every single one of our 484,000 registered voters, and creating and investing early in a very strong field campaign. You know, we have weekly phone making sessions. We're reaching thousands of voters every single week through phone banking. We also have weekly door knocking and canvassing events. We're also already doing voter registration drives in our district. And so we have a very multifaceted approach, and we're trying to meet a diverse district where they are at. And so, you know, we are ready for the establishment attacks. They're already coming, but all that tells us is we're doing something right. We're putting them on their back heels. We're putting them on the defense. And the fact of the matter is, we have assembled the strongest coalition in the history of CA30. And we are going to really challenge Brad Sherman's seat. And we're very confident that we'll get placed into the general and be able to really distinguish ourselves and be able to beat him in 2022.
Great answer. Let me move on to Maury.
Hello, Shervin. My oldest son's name is Shervin. He's 50 years old. Salam. I lived in San Fernando Valley in the late 80s for a couple of years. So I am quite familiar with that area. And I think you have a very good chance, not only because of the immigrant population there, not only because of the large Iranian American population there and Arab and Hispanics, but also because you are the right person. I applaud your stance on issues, and I think you have a lot of strength in your speaking strength. So I think I'd like to ask all of the Iranian Americans and from here and all the members of the club, as well as through Dr. Qazvini, who is here from Los Angeles area, Orange County, we should pass the message to all Iranian Americans, Democrats, to support you with contributions, with phone calls, and so on. Good luck to you, Shervin John.
Thank you so much, Maury John, for that vote of confidence. And you know, your son has a great name. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's what's really exciting about our campaign, is that this is really the opportunity for Iranian American Democrats to really assemble and build political power. We have hundreds of thousands of Iranian Americans across the entire country, yet one of our own has never been in office. This is our opportunity to change that. And I think it's a very powerful message to reach the Iranian American community. And I hope for every opportunity to speak with our community about the issues they care about, to be able to really bring in that coalition. And we're going to need all the support that we can get. Because like I said, although we're very proud to say we've outraised all prior primary challengers, we are still going against the machine. And the machine has a 3 million corporate war chest. So he can easily blanket the entire district. And so to the extent we can get as many communities to donate to our campaign, volunteer for our campaign, it's going to be essential to get the community behind us so we can have our best shot at success in 2022.
Please put your information on chat so that people can contribute to you.
Will do, yes. My campaign manager, Adam Furlicker, is on the call. I saw he popped in the website. We'll make sure we add, there it is, the ActBlue link as well. Thank you, Adam.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Let me move on to Mariam next.
Hi, Shervin. I just wanted to mention that I don't know if you're aware or not. We have formed a group of Iranian American delegates for the California Democratic Party, but most of them are in Southern California. One of them actually became the secretary for California Democratic Party, Melahat Rafi'i. I hope you know her, and if you don't, please give me your information so I can connect you with them.
Yes,
and
please.
If you can, please come to a Stop the Recall campaign we have coming up on August 15, so that you can also mention your candidacy there. We cannot vote for you. I'm in Bay Area, but at least we can campaign for you, and they can help you because most of them are in LA area.
I appreciate that, Mariam John. Absolutely. I'll make sure that Adam, our campaign manager, gets in touch with you and provides our email address. Would love to come speak and appreciate the information.
Yes, we've campaigned for the CDP, the 25th district in the past. We have written postcards, both in Farsi and in English. That seemed to help. So we can do that for you if you know what is, your constituents. If you have names of the Iranian Americans, we contact phone bank and so on. But I'm going to put my email here. You can send it to me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, We were able to reach all their a little over 5,000 Iranian American households in our district, and we were able to reach them with Nowruz cards a few months ago.
Yes.
We're also featured in Javanon magazine as well. So yeah, looking for as many opportunities to reach the community as possible.
But more exposure. We even did the event. I don't want to take your time, but we did the event for all over California, and we even reached outside to other states, and people are shocked because it was Iranian American Democrats for Biden. We collaborated with them and had an event. I believe Mary Lou was there, right? Last year, or yeah, I think last year. But anyway, let's just connect and do whatever we can.
Thank you so much.
We
All right,
should.
let me move on to Dr. Tim next.
A quick question. I like your energy. I just wanted to compliment you on a quite comprehensive presentation. It
Thank you, Dr.
sounds
Tim.
like, I don't know the areas up there. I'm not a kind of a newer person to California, but sounds like Sherman has very strong ties to banking and finance. I'm aware Representative Porter is addressing the pharmacy industry directly. Have you had any contact with California leaders about that aspect, the financial aspects of seeping into the political, and is there a plan to deal with the multiple areas that happens?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, I mean, just to answer with Brad, absolutely. You know, he's one of the senior members of the Financial Services Committee, and he chairs the subcommittee on investor protection, entrepreneurship, and capital markets. And the reason why that particular subcommittee is so important for our district in LA and California in general is because that subcommittee has jurisdiction over our federal housing finance laws, over Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and over authorizing new affordable housing programs. And it was when he became chair of that subcommittee last cycle that BlackRock and Blackstone, the two Wall Street private equity firms, that are responsible for purchasing 1 in 5 single family homes nationwide, started bankrolling his reelection campaign. So that again demonstrates where his loyalties lie. And so in terms of connecting with the state party, one thing I'll say, and I knew this working on Capitol Hill, Brad is not the most well-liked guy in the Democratic Party. And that goes back to 2012, when he won his seat in a redistricting year against another incumbent, Howard Berman. And in 2020, when Jamal Bowman ousted Elliot Engel, Brad also serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Brad was actually the most senior member and next in line to take the helm as chair. But because of his hawkish imperialistic stances on foreign policy, he scored a distant third in his bid for chair in a vote of his own colleagues. And so what that shows us is as we continue building this plane, as we continue building our coalition and continue building our viability, we are certain that if we cannot at least get the endorsement of the Democratic Party, we can block one for him. Because he is not someone that is up there and very entrenched with the party itself. Now, you might say that organizations like D-TRIP are not going to help progressive primary challengers. You're right about that. But again, the fact remains that Brad isn't their guy either. And so our job is to focus on our district, focus on our voters, raise as much money as we can, get as many endorsements as we can, get as many volunteers as we can, and we'll see them come, as they say.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more hands raised, so I'll save my 7 or 9 other questions for later, for another time. Shervin, thank you again for making the time. I think everyone, hopefully by now, knows how to connect with you and understands the stakes. Just because you have a D next to your name doesn't mean you're doing the people's bidding. I hope people have learned that lesson by now. So without further ado, I guess any final comments before we move on?
No, just again, want to extend my gratitude to you, Maz, and everybody on the call for the opportunity to chat with all of you. Thank you all so much for the work you do in your communities. And I look forward to many future engagements.
Likewise. All right, thank you. And please feel free to stick around. We're almost done with the meeting. We have a next topic might be interesting.
I do need to run to another meeting, unfortunately.
No problem.
But again, thank you so much for having me.
All right,
Khodafis.
have a
Thank you,
good
everyone.
Shab Bekhair.
Shab Bekhair.
All right, let's move on to Jeff. Jeff, thank you for joining us. You have the next topic, which is, let me just, I can't never remember the acronyms. It's like there's a T and a V, TFVA, Temporary Family Visitation Act. So we asked Jeff to do a little research on this, and he's going to summarize his analysis.
All right, thanks, Maz. Hi, everybody. Maz and I spoke a few weeks ago about things we could maybe add to the meetings that would be more engaging. Everything that we already have is great, but just a quick, like a value add, seemed to us a good idea and something that we settled on. And again, you know, we can take everybody else's ideas as well. Moving forward, it's a fluid thing, but was any legislation that could potentially or would potentially affect our community, we would kind of delve into, or I would, and Maz and I would discuss it, and then I would do a quick rundown of maybe 5 minutes or so to kind of get everybody engaged and get everybody involved, so everyone knows kind of what's, you know, being proposed out there and how to get involved. And one of the main things, and I know Maury brought this up actually months ago, I think maybe at the end of last year, before it got brought into the Senate just a few months ago, and that is this Temporary Family Visitation Act. Basically what it is I'm sure most of you are aware, maybe Dr. Tim might not be, but any of the Iranians here are aware that in order for any of our relatives to come and visit currently that don't have permanent residency here, they have to basically apply for a B2 visa, which means, you know, they're requesting to come here for pleasure. For that same reason, it's heavily scrutinized and oftentimes denied. They have to go to interviews, and if they have any familiar ties here in the U.S., they're, you know, kind of under quote unquote suspicion that they're going to come here and stay longer, or just trying to stay permanently. So it's pretty difficult to get a visa to come here for just one occasion, you know, for a wedding, for a funeral, for a birthday, a graduation, something of this sort. And so it seems to me, by, you know, the language of this amendment that was proposed and introduced in the Senate, that it's trying to accomplish, basically on the face of it at least, a new group. It would basically be a B3 visa, a new non-immigrant category visa, in addition to the B2, allowing for immigrants, I mean, obviously not just Iranians, but the Hispanic community, the Asian community would be affected by this a lot, South Americans. They would then be allowed to request a B3 visa to come and stay for up to 90 days for an occasion that has to do with a relative. And a relative can be anything from a child, father, grandfather, grandchild, cousin, aunt, uncle, anybody related to you kind of is covered under the language. And basically there are two requirements that are not in the B2 application. And the first one is that someone here has to petition for the person to come, and just as they do now, except they, you know, they would have to sign an affidavit of financial support for the duration of the applicant's stay here. So there's kind of a safety net for the US government that, you know, there is a financial responsibility taken on by someone here for that person for the duration of their stay. The second thing, which seems to be a little bit more, there's a little bit more of a gray area, and Maz and I discussed this last weekend, and a little bit more potential for people being on one side or the other of this, is the fact that the applicant has to purchase travel medical insurance for the duration of their stay here. Now, Maz, after we spoke, I looked into this a little bit more because we were discussing, hey, you know, might there be then a monopoly? You know, certain companies are donating a bunch of money, insurance companies, and they might have a monopoly on selling this, and, you know, they can kind of do price gauging and, you know, set the prices, and people don't have a choice. It's not an open market, that kind of stuff. And I know Maz is very sensitive about that kind of stuff because he's very involved in it. So I looked into this, Maz, and actually it looks like the travel insurance could be previously held by the person wherever they're coming from, as long as their insurance has an option to extend to travel anywhere. So they don't necessarily have to purchase a third-party travel insurance from someone in the US. So that's the second requirement. The other thing that was interesting to take into account is that it prohibits people from traveling on that B3 visa to change their visa status. They can't do that anymore. So they can come, they have to stay under that visa for the entirety of the visit, and it can only be up to 90 days. And the very last contingency was if someone who was petitioned for a relative to come, someone from that lives in the US is petitioned, and that relative came in the past and overstayed their visa, they can no longer petition for another relative to come back in the future. So it kind of keeps a little bit of, or adds a little bit of accountability to the person that is living here in the US and petitioning for the person to come. That's basically the rundown of it. Now, Maz, if you want to jump in and talk about PAYA and NIAC and who has supported it strongly and who has yet to take a stance on this, go ahead. I do know that, it's bipartisan support has been strong for this, and in both House and the Senate. And Scott Peters was actually one of the original sponsors of this, our own Scott Peters, and it's garnered pretty wide support from many, both Republican and Democratic groups, especially Hispanic and Iranian and Jewish groups. So Maz, if you want to jump in with the NIAC and the PAYA.
Sure. Okay, I guess I'm on there. Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of spoke about this already, but PAYA is definitely lobbying for this, and NIAC is not taking an official position on this. Beyond that, I think that's a pretty good analysis. I think if I were to put my Iranian American hat on, I would say this is mostly a good thing because it gives people one additional way to come to the US at a time when those options were very close to us. And a lot of us kind of felt that at a very sort of intrinsic level, even if, just at it was just insulting that we were treated as second-class citizens. I think if anything else, I think that's probably the biggest problem. But I am sensitive to the healthcare requirements because I think it sets a precedent to require that. And I worry that that's going to broaden to other forms of immigration and serve as a deterrent to immigration and make it only for those who can afford. So essentially keeping the poor out of our immigration system, which is not, historically, it's not necessarily a good thing for our nation. But that's a value judgment that anybody can make on their own. So beyond that, I think that's it. I think I see Maury has a question.
Actually, it's an item from the agenda that we postponed to later on, and that is the approval of the minutes of last meeting. I'd like to motion that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Excellent, thank you. And so the minutes are approved. And just for everyone's information, the main decision that was made in the last meeting was the resolution overturning in support of a resolution for an amendment in support of overturning Citizens United and corporate personhood. So we're adding our voice to that.
Please ask if.
Oh yes, sorry. I'm still new to this.
Or
any objection to the motion?
That's good.
Sorry, I'm an amateur.
Thank you.
I'm not hearing any objections or questions. Okay, thank you. Before we adjourn, I just want to make sure that Jeff, if you wanted to add anything more, or if anyone has any question about this particular legislation, I think we can certainly go into more depth about it. I think 5 minutes probably doesn't do it justice, but I'll leave it to this group to sort of voice their interest level about going further into this, because it really is part of a broader, immigration reform topic that we haven't really spent any time on. If there's interest, please send me or Maury or one of us an email if you feel that that's a good topic to have in the future, and we can certainly plug that into the bigger context.
And Maz, just to jump in, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we were speaking in the board meeting about having someone actually come who was involved with the legislation and speak about it. We wanted to kind of first bring it to you guys with a nonpartisan, well, not nonpartisan is not a good word for it, but we didn't want to support it or be against it. We just kind of want to throw it out there to let everybody know that this is actually going on. And then leave it up to you guys, like Maz just said, to request someone coming in. I think Scott Peters would obviously be, one person that you would really want to come in and give his 2 cents about this, since he was one of the original sponsors, not co-sponsors, like what Shervin was saying before. He was one of the main sponsors of this. So I think that's not a bad idea. And also just wanted to echo what I said earlier about, if you guys have any other ideas of ways that we can do a value add to these meetings, and so people can get more out of them than just politicians coming and speaking, I think that's something that we should look into. And Maz and I are open to, taking any suggestions. I think it would be great to kind of mix things up and, keep things from getting, sometimes, I wouldn't say boring, but when we're only talking about politics, and I know this is a political club, but it'll be nice to kind of mix things up and, throw other things out there that people can get out of it as well.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, ideas are always welcome. I forgot about one last agenda item, which I think we can do in 1 minute or less. Amira John, I think you joined late. Hope you're back from your vacation. Hello, are you there? Or maybe you're still on vacation. That's a good thing too. Are you there for the financial report? Okay, maybe we lost her, and that's okay. I think hopefully we'll have more on that next time anyway. I can kind of assure you.
I'm here,
Oh,
Maz.
there you are. Okay. Go ahead.
We still have the same amount of money in the bank, $1,344. No new money in and no expenses. We finally stopped UB from charging our accounts for that unforeseen action that we had from them for the online banking. No more charges, but we are still struggling with them to get our money back from previous month's charges. But still same amount, no action from last time.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll just add that we're still struggling with PayPal, and that's a whole long story that I don't think I will bore you guys with at this time. So is there any other questions or thoughts before we adjourn? Sorry, we're a little over the budgeted time. All right, thank you guys for your time, and we'll talk to you guys next month. Thank you all. Bye, guys.